Good evening and welcome to Planet First Action here on stage at Newlab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Over 80,000 square feet of space dedicated to the advancement and successful growth of the companies that are building the future across energy, materials, and mobility. My name is Jacob Frost.
And I'm Ryan Gordon.
And we are your hosts, and what a week it has been.
I know the Olympics are over. I didn't get to go. That is much the shame, and as always, not without controversy.
Of course it wasn't. And now we have Ernesto, which is strengthened to a hurricane and has left thousands without power in Puerto Rico.
That's right. And Vice President Kamala Harris has selected Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, as her running mate.
And with that, now the campaigns are in full tilt heading into the U.S. elections in November, which, speaking of, we're going to get some insights on how to prepare for that in just a moment.
Yeah, I know, and the seasons are changing. It's kind of all over the place. People are getting back into return-to-school mode.
Honestly, I'm not ready for it. I went to the store the other day, and I was practically assaulted by Halloween-themed items, and to be honest, it was pretty depressing. But with all of that being said, there's a lot going on. There's so much going on. And with that, it's easy to get lost in the flow of things, to lose sight of the major changes that are happening in the background. But those major changes, they are continuing, and that is exactly what we are going to continue to focus on with this series.
Absolutely, and not those 12-foot skeletons that everyone happens to see all over the place. But seriously, and as always, to everyone listening in, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everyone who has subscribed and shared these episodes and contributed to this community and to this critical work. If you've been listening in, you'll know this already, but for those who are just tuning in for the first time, Planet First Action isn't a show about debating politics or debating science. It is a show that is fundamentally a call to action, a ringing of the bell, so to speak, because the future is already here, whether we like it or not. The world is continuing to change, faced with the biggest challenge we've known in our history. Quite literally, the preservation of our planet.
That's the truth. And the technologies of the future, the jobs of the future, the social contracts of the future, they're no longer in the future. They are already here today. And we cannot wait for part 2 of our conversation with Clare Doyle Dowd in just a moment here on stage at Newlab to continue to dive into what those changes, what those new technologies and initiatives, what they really mean for all types of stakeholders, and specifically what they mean for our communities and our families.
That's right, and Clare Doyle Dowd is the head of policy at BlocPower. And let us tell you, she is a wealth of knowledge and experience and insights, as we've shared in our last episode, from her work at the largest community development finance institution in the entire country, to her role as a member of Bill Clinton's presidential administration. She has led an exceptional career, and Clare Doyle Dowd brings that incredible career and experience and insight to the work that she does, and to this conversation for all of us to learn from, especially when it comes to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, one of the flagship components of the Biden-Harris administration's climate policy. $27 billion of public money designed to attract an additional $150 billion of private capital that's all focused on deploying new clean energy technologies. It's about decarbonizing our homes and our transportation and realizing a just and equitable energy transition.
That's exactly right. And with the work that we do at Gordon & Frost, our full-service agency that is focused in on scaling new sustainability solutions and climate technologies across a range of disciplines, one of the things that we support our clients with most feverishly right now in this moment is with regard to the urgency and tremendous impact that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is going to have. And for all of you who have been tuning in regularly, you'll know that core belief of our team here, as we discuss with our executive producer, Julien, constantly, is that everyone needs to know about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to understand what it is, what it means for our homes, our jobs, and our way of living. And as we shared in an earlier episode, when you look back into our history as a country, you can see the amazing things that are accomplished when government mobilizes effectively toward a goal. But you can also see the challenges, the unintended consequences, and the negative impacts that can occur on some communities when they aren't at the table with a voice and a stake in the decisions and the solutions.
That's absolutely right. And frankly, that is why we cannot emphasize enough that everyone needs to pay attention to what's happening with this $27 billion from the GGRF. No matter if you live in a rural part of the country, in suburbia, or in the city, it's going to dramatically change your day-to-day life with each of its 3 parts: the National Clean Investment Fund, the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, and the Solar for All program.
And if you're listening in right now and you're saying, I have literally no idea what you're talking about, Jacob and Ryan, well, we would encourage you to hit pause on this, whether you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple or on YouTube, wherever you're listening, just hit pause and go over to planetfirstaction.com. We have an entire resource page dedicated to understanding the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, who the applicants are, even with those links accessible to learn about their specific plans as they outlined in their applications to the EPA.
It is absolutely worth it because the GGRF has the potential to dramatically alter the very fabric of our communities and the way that we live and work together.
Exactly. And when you're done reviewing that, if you haven't already, go back and check out the last two guests that we brought onto this series as well, because each of them have not only been incredible and visionary leaders to learn from, but those leaders who are specifically working on the front lines of how the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is going to come to life in our communities.
Tony Kearns, our second guest as the founding partner of Purpose Venture Group, the company that incubated the leading national electrification advocacy group, Rewiring America, as well as the Power Forward Communities Coalition, one of the awardees of the GGRF, receiving $2 billion of that $27 billion.
I mean, honestly, sometimes, Ryan, I forget how just massive $1 billion is. It's so hard to comprehend, but $2 billion is just incredible. And Tony shares amazing insights about how they're planning to deploy that. And then the next guest, Jackie Logan, the co-founder and chief investment officer of Raise Green, an incredible organization that is leveraging the newly activated financial tool of regulated crowdfunding, which may, in the name of it, sound boring, but is actually incredibly exciting because it not only democratizes access to the investment opportunity of new clean energy projects, but it can, when it's paired with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, enable so many more communities to directly own their own energy supply, building localized wealth and empowerment for all communities as a part of this energy transition, truly enabling a just and equitable transition. And today, for part 2 of our interview with Clare Doyle Dowd of BlocPower, the award-winning and frankly category-defining climate tech company that is truly changing the world from the grassroots community level up. And Clare specifically, who spearheads their work as it relates to public policies like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund under the leadership of BlocPower CEO Donnell Baird. These 3 incredible visionary leaders, back to back to back, all with that focus on dimensionalizing and understanding what the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is, what does it really mean for each of us, whether we are startup founders, local elected officials, investors, or just members of our communities that want to create a better future for our families and our neighbors.
That's right. And if you're listening in right now and you haven't had a chance to watch those previous guests, please take a minute. Please do. Go listen to the previous episodes. And again, as we've shared, this is not a show that's just talking about some interesting topics just simply for the sake of it or because we want to. It truly is a call to action. Everyone needs to know about the GGRF. Everyone has something to learn from these incredible leaders. Speaking here on this stage at the world-leading venture platform Newlab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So please share these interviews, help us spread the word, and please reach out on planetfirstaction.com to discover more ways to engage.
And also on planetfirstaction.com, you can learn more about Clare Doyle Dowd and the incredible work that the BlocPower team leads. Because, again, one of the reasons why we are so excited to be continuing this conversation in just a moment is that if you don't know it already, BlocPower is one of the most exciting, innovative, and impactful companies in the world today. They are truly rock stars. And BlocPower is a company that is truly community first. And in our opinion, they might even be better described as a community-based organization or as just community leaders than as just a private sector company, because they empower communities and make buildings healthier, smarter, greener, and more valuable. And according to them, BlocPower's vision of the future is one that is incredible. They see that every home and building in America can be an engine of opportunity, and that all climate, health, and economic benefits flowing from the green economy should be accessible for everyone.
And absolutely. And BlocPower was founded by Donnell Baird. And well, just listen to how Clare describes him in the last episode.
Yeah, Donnell Baird is the CEO and founder of BlocPower. He started the company a little over 10 years ago. And he is what I describe as a force of nature. He had a vision for this work that was very much steeped in his personal narrative, his personal upbringing right here in Brooklyn, where he lived in a household of energy injustice, where his family would open up the oven as a heating source for the family in the very cold months of the winter here in New York. He took that experience and really paired it with an incredible education at Duke, at Columbia Business School, and a strong commitment to community organizing.
That's exactly right. Donnell Baird is a force of nature, a visionary, an inspiration, and an engine of change with and on behalf of our local communities, especially those who have been historically disadvantaged.
And I will say, he is so incredible that even though I'm a UNC Chapel Hill alum, and Donnell graduated from Duke, like that's, Jay, that's pretty crazy. Like that's something for me to actually give somebody props like that. Like I'll avoid mentioning anything about college basketball and really truly give him all the credit that is due, because he has a remarkable story and a passion, and he has translated that into an incredible, tangible result for the communities around him. He's really a true leader.
And I got to say, for all of you listening in, maybe you're familiar with that rivalry, maybe you're not, but I can tell you, as someone who has been working with Ryan for a long time, for him to even acknowledge anyone from Duke, that is remarkable. It is absolutely remarkable. It is something special. So that is should not go understated.
It pains me a little bit, I gotta be honest.
And I don't even know if we honestly have time in this episode to fully account for all of Donnell Baird's awards and those of BlocPower. But just to do our best, here is an abbreviated list. Donnell Baird spent 4 years as a political and community organizer and 2 years managing a national initiative to leverage the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act energy efficiency investments in underserved communities. He is a member of the board of directors of several organizations, including the New York Federal Reserve Bank 2nd District Board, the Climate Reality Project, and the Coalition for Green Capital, which is another organization that was awarded a massive $5 billion from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Additionally, he serves on the advisory committee of the U.S. SEC Small Business Capital Formation. He was a recipient of the Columbia Business School Entrepreneur of the Year Award in 2021, the National Venture Capital Association's Startup Innovator of the Year in 2022, and Time Magazine's inaugural Dreamer of the Year in 2022. And as if that weren't enough, the list goes on, because under his leadership, in 2022, Fast Company named BlocPower the 4th most innovative company in the world. Time Magazine included BlocPower on their list of 100 most influential companies, and CNBC ranked BlocPower as the 42nd most disruptive startup in the world. He truly is an incredible leader, guided by compassion, and having brought together a rock-star team at BlocPower that each live out those values every day in the work that they do.
Yeah, he's like we always say, he truly is a wonderkind. And also he's a young guy. I mean, seriously, it's so impressive that Donnell is just getting started. And in recognition of its work to date, just last year, BlocPower was honored as an emerging leader by Vice President and now Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris in Washington, D.C. at the Vice President's residence. BlocPower truly is an incredible company, zeroed in on helping communities, willing to do the hard work that is required to change people's lives, their homes, for the better, to help them save money, to live in a healthier environment, and just to do so much more.
And it's true. They really do the hard work. And speaking of that work, listen to this quote. This is what Donnell Baird shared following their $150 million fundraising round and the honored recognition that they received by Vice President Harris. He said that whenever someone wants to make a change or do something new, nothing is guaranteed to turn out according to the best laid plans. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, and you can't renovate a home without dust and mess, and sometimes lead, mold, and asbestos. We go into low-income communities to finance and upgrade 100-year-old buildings, and sometimes we run into 100-year-old surprises lurking in the walls or hiding in the basement. But I'm proud that at BlocPower, we always finish what we start, and we clean up messes. The biggest mess of all is the climate crisis.
No, that's absolutely right. And I mean, and just think about it. I mean, I just got done with renovating a little bit of my house, and how much of a problem and like how much difficulty I had doing that. And imagine doing that for 100-year-old buildings and for huge, huge multifamily dwellings. It is an immense challenge and frankly, just so important and also just so profound in terms of the difference and impact he's able to have on these kinds of communities. It's really, truly staggering. And again, for everyone listening, it is crucial to recognize how different BlocPower is than so many other companies. Being so focused on working with and alongside these communities directly, that is how they're able to be so impactful. And just listen to Clare from last week's episode on what that really means.
And so it's not a top-down solution that we kind of came in and said, this is what you should be doing in your community. They already had the idea around it. And BlocPower has, because we've been around for 10 years, we have the tools, the software, the staffing, the construction knowledge, the connections with manufacturers around the country, and also a very strong understanding of the ecosystem of financial institutions, investors, what do building owners want. So we have that, and we've kind of pair it with the vision that is at the local community. And that really, what's special about that is that you are standing up a really strong anchor in a community that will last for many years.
That's right. Working with communities requires trust, and it requires collaboration, and most of all, it requires the community to be an active, involved, and empowered participant executing their vision.
And just before we continue this conversation with Clare, we'll leave you with this insight from our 28th President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. Something that we ourselves hold dear at Gordon & Frost, and something that we believe is a core value of leaders like Danelle Baird and Clare Doyle Dowd. You are not here merely to make a living. You are here to enable the world to live more amply, with greater vision, with a finer spirit of hope and achievement. You are here to enrich the world. You impoverish yourself if you forget this errand.
And now, to that greater mission, here is part 2 with Clare Doyle Dowd, the head of policy at BlocPower. And I think just kind of going back to what you were just talking about a minute ago in terms of tech transfer and building these partnerships and sort of coalitions, we are, as we've shared with the audience that's been tuning in for the past few weeks, so happy to be on this stage in particular, being here at Newlab at the Navy Yard, because Newlab really is one of the best in the world at convening those different stakeholders, from corporate innovation partners to investors, to industry partners, to the startups and entrepreneurs themselves. So we know BlocPower had its home here, as in Brooklyn generally, but also here in Newlab.
Yes.
And so we'd just love to take a moment to talk about that in terms of what was that involvement and that being a part of that community here at Newlab like for that initial growth and that launch of the company.
Yeah, very exciting. Newlab is a place of incubation, innovation. It's a locus of kind of all of these exciting new companies that are starting up, that are excited to grow and scale. And Newlab has been an incredible partner for BlocPower from the beginning. Early on, we had our presence here and kind of were building out the initial ideas around block maps here with our product and technology team. And just about a year and a half ago, right in this room where we are, BlocPower had a company-wide 2-day retreat that was really focused on actually community organizing, so that people who are working at our company who are engineers or product and software developers and people like myself and the finance team, we all could understand, what does community organizing mean? What does this partnership work mean? How can we understand what is going to drive the decision around of a community, of a building owner, to make a clean energy transition? And so we did a lot of role playing right here in this room, and Newlab has been an incredible partner, and we're very pleased to have that connection.
Awesome, that's amazing. So let's get in your bailiwick specifically.
Okay.
So talk a little bit about policy. So what are some of your favorite policies in terms of how they're able to kind of impact BlocPower today? What are the most important ones you feel actually are really kind of driving your business right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So two of them, they really are in the Inflation Reduction Act. So the first is the home energy rebates. So there's 2 rebates there There is the home energy appliance rebate and the home efficiency rebate. And we call them here and her, or some people call them homes and here. But one is the here rebate is a point of sale rebate that is around, just as the title is, appliances. So air source heat pumps, induction stoves, other types of appliances that the consumer is going to be able to take advantage of at a big box retail store. And so we're very focused on how to look at the work that we do is around aggregating multifamily building projects. So aggregating projects in a state to take advantage of the HERE rebate when those rebates are launched in every state. The homes rebate is also another one that's what's called a whole homes approach. So how can the rebate is based on the amount of energy efficiency achieved over time. And so you're looking at multiple, what's called measures of how to improve that. So we are excited about that because it's actually a lot of the work that we do every single day. The other policy that we're very excited about is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. This is really around deploying capital into the marketplace, especially with the National Clean Investment Fund, deploying capital to generate a clean energy transition. What's also exciting about the CCIA tranche of funds is that that's around kind of with smaller CDFIs, building up their capacity and kind of their competence in kind of the blend of energy efficiency work and lending products. And then Solar for All is a program in GGRF. Those funds are allocated to every single state in the country and through other partners who are going to launch the Solar for All focus, obviously on the solar revolution. So those are, why am I excited about those? Because it's a once in a generation kind of opportunity with actually both with the rebates, which is around a little bit of the consumer engagement, building owner engagement, and then you have GGRF, which is around kind of the capital deployment and kind of building partnerships with philanthropic connections also around that capital connection. So those are two of the policies I'm excited about. In the past, I've been very excited about, of course, the low-income housing tax credit, which it started 40 years ago, which is still a driver of affordable housing. And we're looking at partnerships with the ecosystem that's been heavily invested in what we call LIHTC, for decades. And there is a really once in a generation opportunity to connect LIHTC properties with the clean energy transition through GGRF and the rebates, which is going to happen.
Yeah, I think you couldn't have said it better, and that is something that, especially for the audience listening that's been hearing us with each of our guests, make sure we touch on what is really going on with the GGRF, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. It is $20 billion. It is nothing to overlook. It is massive in terms of what it is actually doing to help in terms of its direct investment in and of itself, but also really crucially how it's going to help spur additional private capital to come into that exact work of decarbonizing buildings in large part, but also across the board in terms of decarbonization, renewable energy, and especially working in disadvantaged communities. I think the figure is that it's expected to drive 7-to-1 in terms of the ratio of public investment to private investment. So when you say you're excited about it, we make sure we're listening, and we encourage everyone that is at home taking notes to pay attention, because really the GGRF and both of the components, the NCIF, the CCIA, but as well as, to your point, the Solar for All program, each of those have really massive consequences in terms of shaping the landscape. We're also in the middle of summer. So it is actually not. It's not an old thing. It was just announced a couple weeks ago. It feels like at this point, although time's flying. Right after we had the March event, in terms of who the awardees are, and we know we are in the thick of it in terms of actually figuring out the details of how it's going to get deployed through each of those different coalitions, and then actually the EPA distributing it by September. So we know BlocPower is heavily involved in, I think, most of the coalitions. I think Danelle might actually also be on the chair for the Coalition for Green Capital on the board there, helping guide how they're thinking about things. But that being said, there's certainly things that you may not be able to share yet, but would just love to ask, especially for the audience listening in, what does that work look like right now in terms of trying to figure out how the GGRF really comes to life, practically speaking?
Yeah, well, what I think is happening is that, all of these players are trying to work out their contracts, with EPA. There's a lot of complexity, obviously, about how those contracts are going to be negotiated and finalized. I think we're looking at probably, sometime by late July, I think has been common knowledge that some of those contracts will be executed. And then over the next several months, the NCIF winners will be looking at both scaling up probably their own operations, but also building the platform and the market segment that they are going to focus on. So there's a lot of beauty of looking at the EPA website for the NCIF landing page, because each of the NCIF awardees, their submission is right there. The page limit was 70 pages. I have read each of their submissions, and you're essentially looking at a playbook. What do they intend to do? What is their market segment? What does their partnership look like? Because these are consortiums that have come together. So obviously, Power Forward is a consortium of enterprise, community partners, LISC, Rewiring America, Habitat for Humanity, and United Way. So each of them will have a set of responsibilities that ties to deploying that capital and making a clean energy transition. So I would recommend, if someone wants to get into the weeds of these, of kind of reading the details, we are looking at kind of BlocPower has projects that we have built up a pipeline over many years of projects that would be good candidates to take advantage of this lower cost financing. So we're going to be eager to hear about how these partners will be looking at building their pipeline and evaluating projects that would be good candidates for a lower cost transition. Because at the end of the day, a building owner in particular is going to be motivated by cost.
Right.
We've talked about the importance of rebates and incentive tools in our BlockMap software. They want to understand, what is the cost going to be? What is the cost of capital? What are the rebates? How can I stack other programs to drive down the cost of this clean energy project? Because they are expensive. There's no doubt about it. But that cost will probably decrease over time. But right now, the stacking of these incentives is going to be really important.
Right. No, that's great, just in terms of being able to understand and have a better understanding in terms of like how you guys over at BlocPower kind of seeing both of those two huge programs, because they're huge programs.
Right, yes.
But kind of the third one that's out there that is also mentioned, it has $7 billion, it's not a small thing,
Right.
is Solar for All. So how are you guys, or are you guys actually kind of involved in that aspect as well?
Yeah, I mean, we have talked to some of the green banks in different states that are eager to kind of get the program started and launched. And I think it's going to be a program where we're going to be involved in some of the key states, where BlocPower has a presence and has some solutions that we're going to be able to partner with some of the green banks on.
And I think it's interesting because, again, where BlocPower sits in the ecosystem is you're seeing all of these really macro changes play out and seeing the intersection points of what does that mean for really micro level impacts at a household level. How does this $20 billion program, $27 billion program translate to really meaningful differences in someone's life? And one of the things that to go back to a previous episode, we were talking with Jackie Logan of Raise Green, who's doing also great work when it comes to working directly in communities, is that idea of there's a lot of consequential policy that's all happened in a very short amount of time. You have, the GGRF alone, you could spend the entire time talking just about that. But it is in pair with a lot of other major changes, one of them being direct pay.
Yes.
And so that being a mechanism that actually enables a whole slew of all of these incredible, this sector, this part of the economy, the municipalities, the churches, all of the tax-exempt organizations that previously could not benefit from these tax credits,
Right.
to actually now be partaking in the work that these rebates are provided for, these incentives are provided for. So there's a really interesting dynamic happening of you bring in a whole new set of potential organizations that take advantage, at the same time supercharging the public capital that's bringing in additional private capital. How are you thinking about that at a macro level of how all of these different pieces are working together?
Well, it really helps, going back to kind of, I've said it before, like what is the problem statement? What is the problem to solve for, from the perspective of the building owner or the city or a portfolio owner of multiple properties? And so they want to understand, what is it going to cost? What are the rebates? What are the utility opportunities? What are the incentives? So with direct pay, it's very similar. They have been, I wouldn't say shut out in the past, but the opportunity to leverage kind of a tax instrument to facilitate a clean energy transition has not really been in the cards. So we have inbound at BlocPower a lot of nonprofit organizations, a community center, campuses that are like looking at kind of how can I look at my assets over time, my dorms, my community center, my classroom, and look at a clean energy transition. So the direct pay is going to have a big impact. The other thing that I'll just mention is that DOE has a program that's called Renew America's Nonprofits. And that's an exciting program where it's around facilitating a clean energy transition. So what you're looking at really is kind of building, we've talked about an ecosystem, like through some of these grant instruments, building an ecosystem of awareness of grant opportunities around a clean energy transition. So that's happening with nonprofits. And then they can learn about other opportunities like direct pay to facilitate a change, and then learn about kind of the ecosystem of partners who can actually do that implementation work. Maybe it's BlocPower, maybe there's another company that's out there that really can make that work happen. But it's about kind of a layering of kind of understanding and education, and then pairing that with all the financing opportunities and the capital stack.
No, that's impressive. And then also just a huge opportunity. I mean, when you think about it, it's literally like a whole section of the economy. Right. Is really kind of what these tax-exempt organizations, because it's a whole swath, and you talked about it already. So now the question I have for you is, are there any other things, any of these kind of sleeping giants that we need to be aware of, similar to direct pay, that people say, okay, well, look, that's nice, but it doesn't necessarily apply to me, but there's this other thing that actually they may have no idea about?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I would go back to kind of, I think, engaging with the healthcare system. That's we have all these other challenges of kind of deploying this capital, making sure these rebates work. But I'm hoping that the engagement with the health sector could be like what's a sleeping giant. The other sleeping giant, I would say, is kind of when we're looking at housing affordability, and affordable housing, that is a common denominator that's like across the United States. The high cost of rent for many people where they're not seeing necessarily their salaries be increased at the level for a cost of living. So I have heard that there are some innovative pieces of legislation that are moving through Congress around affordable housing and energy impact, kind of blending those two together.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, one ourselves actually that we've been actually thinking about really investigating is actually the REAP program from the Farm Bill.
Oh yeah, right.
Because you don't necessarily think about energy efficiency in farming,
right.
But at the end of the day, most farms basically, if you have a greenhouse, you're going to need it. And then if you start actually, if you're heating your greenhouse with oil and gas or with whatever it happens to be, then guess what? Almost 80% of farms actually fail as a result of actually not being able to pay their power bill.
Okay. Wow.
So if that's actually the case, and then there's a section of the REAP deal that actually allows them to take more solar on. So if that's actually possible, then all of a sudden you can offset the commodity pricing, and then all of a sudden you can kind of smooth out that cost curve.
Wow.
So again, like these different ways to kind of look at a problem and realizing that, there's pockets of these little bills that you may not necessarily be aware of that could have huge impact for your business or basically your bottom line.
Absolutely.
Exactly, and I think that's the thing that's especially interesting to be having this conversation with you. And we've asked this question to everyone that we've had in this first series, which is something that's really important based on where we are in the year, in 2024, which is that there's a lot at stake across the globe when it comes to elections, and especially here in the U.S. It is, as we've been talking about with a number of our guests, one of the most consequential elections as it relates to climate in a long time. And with that, and with your role as head of policy, how are you thinking about preparing for what comes next? After November, after the elections come through, regardless of what the outcome is, how are you thinking about preparing for that continued realization of BlocPower's mission?
Sure. Well, I would say we have a very strong state engagement. So at different times when there's a change in administration and challenges, having a robust relationship that's on the ground with states. States have a huge amount of capital through block grants and through other mechanisms, regulatory and other tools that they have to help facilitate a clean energy transition or to ensure that they are really abiding by the wishes of their citizens for a clean energy transition. So BlocPower really has a very strong ecosystem of relationships with some of the key states across the country. The other thing that I would say is that, what Americans want and what citizens of this country really want is, they want to have jobs, they want to have a healthy community where they can have water that's safe to drink, where they are not breathing in noxious fumes that will curb their life expectancy. And the other common denominator is that people want to have independence of energy systems from other countries that might be energy independence really is kind of one of the key areas. And so BlocPower cannot we are not focused on energy independence, from other, global countries. But what we can do is by solar, wind, air source heat pumps, and other mechanisms, reduce oil dependency, reduce gas dependency on other countries. So what are the things that kind of bind, us as citizens in this country? It's really around jobs, health, and safety. Right. And I think those are the things that the clean energy transition really is about. And I'm hoping that through a lot of conversations with people who have different opinions or different perspectives, that you can do that bridge building of understanding, there's not, environmental activism is really not about creating a divide. It's around kind of the common denominators that will make our country strong.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put. And I think it's also something that especially everyone that's working in climate tech, where we can sometimes get focused in on our particular business or this particular sector, to always remember that it's worth taking a step back and realizing it is about those things that commonly bind us as citizens in this country and as global citizens. It is the impact to your health, is the impact to your jobs, to your livelihood, and to your independence as an independent country where you don't need to rely on someone else to power your way of living. So it's a really important reminder. And to what you just mentioned about bridge building, to be able to have those conversations, that again, that's why we're having Planet First Action. Right. That is the reason behind this initiative.
That's exactly it. Sorry.
And no, so there's a perfect setup for that, because that is exactly why we're doing this, why we're so happy to have you on the stage with us, to have those insights and to hear how you're thinking about these things, especially again with the audience being that mix of different types of stakeholders. And so as we start to wind down, as we always do, we'd love to just open it up to you to say, from your vantage point, from the experience that you have, what is your advice, your message for those different types of stakeholders, starting with, as always, the startups and the entrepreneurs, especially those that are trying to work in building decarbonization but aren't sure how to best get involved, to best take advantage of what's going on with the GGRF, and just wanted to find ways to understand their entry point.
Sure. I would say look in new corners with new opportunities that you might not have heard of. So there is an abundance of funds through the DOE and the national labs. So I mentioned the Cradle to Commerce accelerator that we're part of. Many of the companies that are in that are almost pre-seed. So they learned about the Cradle to Commerce opportunity. It's really around kind of building their capacity as an understanding of how do I do my innovation, focus on my product that I'm developing, but also understand that there's an ecosystem where I need to drive financing solutions to scale and launch my product. So looking in new corners, new ways of kind of partnering with opportunities that might not be apparent would be one of my pieces of advice for small entrepreneurs. For investors, bridge building with companies that are doing creative work that have the vision to scale and launch, their products and services across the country. And also, there's nothing like a connection. Obviously, this is, everyone knows this, but going to like new types of conferences. You mentioned the Farm Bill or the Farm Act and the REAP program. I didn't know anything about that. I wouldn't have made that connection. And so there are ways that you can learn. I know that you all were at the mobility conference in Chattanooga recently. And I'm sure that was incredibly insightful about kind of new partnerships, new technology that's on the horizon. So
yeah, no, that's a great point. Again, goes back to the core of this mission, because who would have thought that, as we shared with Cam at the very beginning of the series, that Chattanooga's actually got the country's largest urban test bed for new companies that are trying to pilot solutions that are for the built environment specifically and for urban environments. That's actually a place that they should be thinking about when it comes to how do they grow and their path forward. So to your point, that's exactly something that everyone should be doing, is getting out of your normal swim lane in terms of your sources of information and thinking about what other stakeholders are hearing, what other types of parties are thinking about and listening to, because it does help inform those opportunities that you might not otherwise know.
I did hear Annie Lamont, who's the First Lady of Connecticut, the wife of Governor Ned Lamont. She's also a partner at Oak, I've forgotten the name of her VC firm. But one of the questions that came up in an interview with her recently was, how did you pivot to kind of the next thing of looking at the next opportunity in the health ecospace? And it was a similar response that she provided that you just said, Jacob, is that when you're kind of settled, you don't just settle, you're kind of looking on the horizon for the next, it's not just the next opportunity, but what is going to be moving the market. So.
Right. Exactly. It's an ecosystem thing. You need to make sure, okay, well, look, where are trends going generally, and then make sure you actually kind of are able to kind of ride that trend.
Right. Yep.
Exactly. So now we've talked about, and you were very gracious and also very insightful about, okay, well, what should founders do, and then what should investors do? So now this is, again, going straight back into your ball court from a policy side of things. What should, like, when you start thinking about like all the impact that these policies and these kind of legislations have had, what should they start looking for 2.0? What should that actually start looking like? What should they really focus on?
Yeah, I would say focusing on kind of the current programs that are going to be, the tax credits are going to be 10 years. So there are innovative companies that are out there in the tax credit market. Crux, for example, is one of them, market making around the tax credit instrument. So that's a 10-year horizon. That those tax credits could be renewed. Like the low-income housing tax credit, a tax credit I'm familiar with, that never started off as a permanent tax credit. That was it was time horizon for maybe 5 years, and then it was renewed, and then it was permanently renewed. So focusing on kind of those instruments, and then looking at how are these programs, GGRF, how are they actually going to be deployed? What are the gaps, the white space in that solution set that my company or my solution that I have as a company leader or as a nonprofit organization can like match and advance. That's what I think.
No, that makes perfect sense. So now the next piece of this is basically getting down to kind of almost your bread and butter, which is municipalities.
Okay.
So in thinking of that, and what you've mentioned some cities, kind of large and small,
right?
But really, where should they start actually in being engaged with you, and then also just generally speaking, kind of the decarbonization journey, like writ large?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say that there are a lot of trade organizations for different cities. So National League of Cities, U.S. Conference of Mayors have been spending a lot more time around energy solutions and climate work. There are other city organizations that have popped up, C40, for example, and then also there's a new organization that's led by Mayor Justin Bibb of Cleveland called Climate Mayors, and they just had a national conference in Cleveland actually a few weeks ago. So learning about kind of that ecosystem of kind of the climate action and what actions can be taken at the city level, I think will be very important. Also, just for cities and towns to just have a committee around sustainability. Start with small actions that may seem like they are not necessarily that impactful, like even things like composting in schools. Right. I think your other guest actually at the March event has an investment in a company that is doing interesting work around composting, new composting technology, and looking to scale that even at schools. So that really comes from bringing people together in a town, at a city level with small actions to kind of drive awareness for the political leadership, the city council leadership, and things like that.
Awesome.
It's about building bridges. It's about getting outside of your normal cycle of information and to finding those new partners and working. Understanding you need to work at a local level even when it comes to these macro issues. So thank you again for all of the insights and the advice and the wisdom throughout this conversation. We have to say, as we do with everyone, we cannot let you go. We can't kind of end this without having a better understanding of not just Clare as head of policy at BlocPower, but Clare as a person. So we got some fun questions for you. Maybe these other ones are fun for us too anyway, but whatever. They're also fun in a different way. The first one is with regard to something that's a lot more in popular culture these days, which we'll see where that goes in actual technology, is time travel. But if you could go anywhere in the world at any time, where would you go and why?
Anywhere in the world?
At any time, at any point in history.
Oh, at any point in history.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a tough question. I would say, I would actually say that as a fan of American history, U.S. history, I would love to be at the time of the Revolutionary War and at the Continental Congress to learn about the debates that were happening at that time that were really kind of some of the fundamental areas of kind of the bedrock of our country. That would be like, it's not very exciting. It's in the United States, but I would love to. I'd love to be like in the room, at that time, and to kind of hear how the formation of a country really happened, like after the war was won. Like how did they debate and navigate a very complex time of standing up a new nation, which we are blessed to be in today here in New York.
Great answer. Yeah. And then also just, it was very convoluted just in terms of the actual people who are participating in their incentives and what they are actually looking for.
Yes.
So it's very interesting just in terms of, to your point, how you're able to kind of mesh all the interested parties and again, spring forward like this wonderful nature. So the question that I have for you actually is that when you start thinking about it, and perhaps you've already telegraphed your answer a bit, but what book has actually left the most profound impact on you?
Oh, I have an answer for that, actually. There is a book that I've read called The Power of One.
Okay.
And I think the author's name is Bryce Courtney. It's a fiction book. It takes place in South Africa right after the Boer War. And it's the story of a boy who has a very difficult childhood. And he finds friendship through someone who was a train conductor at that time. And a lot of lessons learned along the way. He was a little bit of the boy became a boxer, and there was a lot of trauma earlier in his childhood. But the lesson learned is that the impact of one individual can have on another individual through the course of their life. And if that example and that model is one of goodness and love, then you bring that forward into the world with everyone who you meet.
Right.
So it's a book that I loved, and I would reread it again. Actually, it's on my nightstand. So.
Oh,
That
fantastic.
sounds amazing. That's another really good answer. And it goes back to, I think, one of the conversations in one of the last episodes was just the importance of just individual actions. It was with Jeff. And recognition of what you, just as yourself and how you present yourself in the world, how much of a difference you make. So that's two really good answers. So yes. But yeah, so I think we're winding down.
Again, you've led such a storied career. You're already here talking about such a wonderful company. And I think there's a lot of people who can actually gain insight in terms of what you've actually, or at least what you felt you've done really great in your career. What are perhaps maybe a misstep, or perhaps something you say, okay, well, look, I could have done that a little bit better. And then also people who are coming up and just entering to the workforce, what would you actually give them advice on as well?
Sure. Really great questions. So I would say, communication is key. And so sometimes when you are early in your career and you're reporting to someone, and you might want to always please them, not ask difficult questions, not challenge a question, or kind of ask them to reframe something, I think it's really important. I think this generation does that so much better than I ever did in my generation, where there was kind of like, it was a little bit frowned upon, to kind of engage with your supervisor in those ways. So regardless of time, I would say that communication is always, one of the key elements to kind of resolving clarity or resolving a problem, or kind of seeking clarification on something that's a blocker. Because at the end of the day, we're all solving problems, like in real life, in time, and communicating about that is really, really key. I would also say that one of the important parts in my career has just really been around relationships. So some of the relationships that I had with people who, when I was in my late 20s, are people who are still in this space today. And I built trust with them early on. And so keeping in touch with people over time, but also, always, it's the same old motto, paying it forward, with your relationships with people is really, really important. I've been blessed to have many wonderful mentors to me over my career. And I take a lot of pride in mentoring the people who report to me, and listening to them and understanding that they have a whole career ahead of them, whether it's at BlocPower or somewhere else down the road, and nurturing kind of those skills so that they can be their best self over, decades of work and contribution to our society is like really important.
Great, fantastic.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That is really great advice, especially for all of those who are just now entering the workforce, to have that in mind, to learn those lessons. So we actually have a special thing for you, because again, part of this is about not just bringing together stakeholders, but actually asking questions of the people who are on the front line so that everyone can learn. And the question we have for you is something that's important, I think, for everyone that's in the space to be asking themselves, certainly, but is, why do you do what you do with your work, and how do you know that it's working?
I do the work that I do because, I, like everyone, I have one life to live. I have gifts that I have that I want to give out to the world, and one of those gifts is to drive solutions around affordable housing, around a clean energy transition, and about saving our planet and making it healthier for everyone. So The other part of how I know that that's working is actually, I mentioned it a few minutes ago. We had, for example, a community advisory board national meeting and learned from stakeholders in Atlanta and Denver and other cities around what a clean energy transition means to them, what they're learning about BlocPower and this electrification work. And so that's from their voice, from their perspective, from where they sit as an actor in their ecosystem of the community that they live in. And so that didn't just happen overnight. It happened through nurturing of building kind of trust in that community. So that is not the culmination of that I know that it's working, but it's a step along the way to demonstrate. It's the other thing that I know why it's working. Another example is that we've done block maps in the city of Cincinnati. City of Cincinnati is called the city of many neighborhoods. I think there's 36 neighborhoods in a very small, much smaller than even Brooklyn. But through block maps, they brought together community-based organizations to understand what are the buildings that are good candidates for electrification and how to solve for those. So the tool, the software tool, was the origin point of bringing stakeholders together, as you described earlier, of understanding how can we develop a clean energy solution through this data, through this mapping, and I can see what needs to be done. So.
And like we said at the beginning and throughout, again, thank you so much for taking the time, staying with us. It's been an electrifying conversation. The time, looking at the clock, I'm like, wow, time is flying. It's been amazing. You've shared such incredible insights, and especially for this audience today. And thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much.
And again, to everyone that's listening in, thank you for listening in. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us, for starting to build this community. As we've been talking about with Clare, that is what it is all about. It is about getting into communities, engaging with them, but also creating the community that enables collaboration across stakeholders to facilitate a just and equitable transition in the timeline that we need it to. We hope that you all that are listening in were able to take away things that you can implement in your daily lives, in your work, whether you're building a business or writing policy or something else. I know for Ryan and I, speaking for us both, after every one of these conversations, we go home and say, wow, that was incredible. We've learned another 10 things that we need to go talk about with our team and with our clients, because we really did focus on bringing up some of the best guests onto this panel. So we hope you all were able to take away some of those insights in there, useful for you in your own missions, in your own work. That's one of the things that's most important. Is we started this series with Cam saying we're closer to the starting block than we are to the finish line. We've got a long way to go. And so we would remind everyone that's listening and that's working in this space to not have the climate doomerism, but to have that optimism, to be grateful for having this opportunity to truly make a difference. That's what Planet First Action is. It is about stakeholders together to have conversation, to have action truly facilitated in the short term, but really that secret ingredient of collaboration. So again, as Ryan says every time, please engage, be a part of the community, subscribe, listen, and sign. Go to planetfirstaction.com to sign up for updates for the next series, the next events, the work that we're doing. And of course, all of the fantastic resources that Clare mentioned will be included in the show notes and on the website there as well. So thank you again for listening in, and thank you again, Clare.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in for the second part of Planet First Action's interview with Clare Doyle Dowd, the head of policy at BlocPower, here on stage at Newlab. As Jay said, definitely go check out BlocPower.io to learn more about the incredible work that Clare and the BlocPower team are driving forward for communities under the leadership of founder and CEO Danelle Baird. And don't forget, this is a call to action. Go over to planetfirstaction.com to learn more, to dive into the details of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and each of the awardees, and to engage. And with that, please share these series with your friends, your family, your coworkers. These changes aren't slowing down. It is our time to engage and to be a part of shaping our collective future.
And speaking of not slowing down, the calendar marches forward. And what that means is that Climate Week NYC is approaching quickly. Mark your calendars for September 22nd to 29th for what will be an incredible week. And specifically, block out your schedule for September 26th to be in Brooklyn at the Navy Yard for Newlab's flagship event, New Climate Futures. It is going to be an incredible event. So if you're in the area, go get your tickets now. We can tell you it's going to be packed with amazing entrepreneurs, organizations, investors, policymakers, corporate innovation partners, community leaders. Everyone who is anyone will be at Newlab on the 26th. So go over to newlab.com right now to get your tickets, and also check out some of the resources highlighting Newlab's incredible work and upcoming event at planetfirstaction.com. If you are a climate tech founder, you can actually apply to get a free ticket to attend. And if you aren't going to be in the area, you can still watch and attend the stage show virtually. All of those resources, again, can be found directly at newlab.com, and you can also find links to get you where you need to go on planetfirstaction.com. And Ryan and I will certainly be there, and we look forward to seeing all of you there. And in addition to the new Climate Futures event, be sure to check out all of the incredible work that Newlab are advancing under the leadership of CEO Cam Lawrence, another true leader, both here in the Navy Yard as well as in their second location in Detroit on Ford's billion-dollar Mobility Innovation District. You cannot overstate the significance of this organization and its impact on our collective present and future, and it is absolutely worth taking the time to check it out.
Absolutely. It truly is a showcase event for that week. And again, thank you so much for listening in. We look forward to seeing you next week for the next episode of Planet First Action.